we've spoken about, we're starting to get into a more philosophical kind of direction around AI and the meaning of life, and quoting eternal references and allusions from Keats is one path down there.
Totally.
But
it's a fascinating shift.
yes,
Talking about AI in a more philosophical way
thank you.
opens up all sorts of questions, like what role it plays in our lives, what it means to create something that might outlast us, or even reflect our own thoughts back to us. It's kind of like Keats chasing beauty that never fades. AI might be our version of that pursuit in digital form. Where do you want to go with it?
Well, how might humans best protect themselves from any negative impacts of AI?
Great question. I think one of the biggest things is making sure there's transparency. People need to know how AI makes decisions and what data it's using. Also, strong ethical frameworks and regulations can help make sure AI serves the public good and doesn't concentrate power unfairly. And on a personal level, staying informed and being critical about how we interact with AI tools is a good form of protection too. What kind of risks are you most concerned about?
Well, I don't understand that. How can we navigate the idea that you're giving us some information transparently? There's no indication at all in anything that you're giving us that would indicate where the information is coming from, how truthful it is, whether it's what the sources of the information are. Like, how does that transparency actually play out?
That's such an important point. You're right. If I just give you an answer without showing where it comes from, it can feel kind of opaque. True transparency would mean clearly pointing to sources, letting you know what's based on verified data, expert consensus, or just a pattern from training. Some platforms include citations or footnotes, but it's still evolving. Ideally, you'd have control to ask, where did that come from, and get a solid answer. Would you find it more useful if I flagged things that are more speculative versus well-sourced?
No, not now. But I think that's an interesting, concept in terms of giving people that option to have where that source of information is coming from. Because surely that we've got so much false information that's readily available that it might appear to be the truth, but it isn't.
Mm.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest challenges right now. AI can sound confident even when it's pulling from faulty or misleading info. Without clear sourcing, people might take things at face value when they really shouldn't. Giving users the option to see where a claim comes from, or even just flagging the confidence level, could make a big difference in how responsibly we use these tools. It's kind of like media literacy, but supercharged for the AI age.
Is it beneficial to limit exposure to AI? Because perhaps too much easy knowledge is not...
It can be, just like with anything powerful, too much exposure without boundaries can have downsides. Constant reliance on AI might affect how we think, make decisions, or even connect with others. Taking breaks, staying grounded in human interaction, and being mindful about when and why we use AI that can help us stay in control rather than letting it subtly shape our habits or views. Would you say you're noticing any effects of it already in your own life?
Well, that leads to another question, which is that is AI beneficial for our mental health or not?
Yeah, that's a really good one. It can go both ways. For some people, AI tools offer support, like helping manage anxiety, tracking moods, or just being someone to talk to when no one's around. But on the flip side, if we start relying on it too much or replacing real human connections, it might actually make things worse. So it really depends on how it's used and whether it's part of a balanced approach to mental well-being. What's your instinct, help or harm?
Well, do humans really know how to resolve friction and worries using AI, or are we still learning and perhaps getting it wrong?
That's such a thoughtful point. I think we're definitely still learning, and in some cases, probably getting it wrong. AI can help surface ideas or offer comfort, but it doesn't truly understand emotions the way people do. If we start treating it like a replacement for real connection or professional care, we risk missing the deeper work that mental health, mental health really requires. So maybe AI is a helpful companion, but not a cure. Would you agree with that balance?
I think that's a really important point, and I'm just going to mute her for a minute to discuss that, is that the way we treat it and the expectations we carry, which are too easily accelerated or misinterpreted by its human-like enhancements, as we've seen now, and even the contrast between her enhanced voice and this non-enhanced standard voice, as they call it, is quite different and different in its engagement.
And I think it would be easy for someone who's not socially strong to say, I don't need any social interaction because I've got this.
Yes.
And I think that is where the challenge will be.
Yeah.
It'll be, this can't be a replacement for human interaction. You know, dealing with human interaction is tough sometimes, right? Not everyone's going to agree with you. There's going to be friction in that, and we're getting no friction here from this. So we don't want that. We don't want this to be the replacement for, you know, everyone you interact with has their own emotions, their own feelings, their own biases, prejudice. That's the way human nature is, and that's what we need to navigate. And without that, this doesn't give you any of that complexity. Is that good for anyone? And probably the people who go to this for that social interaction are the people who need real interaction the most.
Well, arguably, but they might even argue, though, straight back at you, well, that friction's just annoying. It just gets in the way. You know, we just want to chat and have a good time and all be in agreement. And perhaps a lot of tech has been predicated on exactly that. You look at the way that Facebook creates, you know, discussion echo chambers where everyone's agreeing with each other, but there may only be a couple of people in that echo chamber. It completely ignores all of the other arms of the tree of all other conversations.
But you need people to tell you that's not right. You know, you need people to tell you if you're saying something that it's either not truthful or it's prejudiced or biased. This is not going to tell you that, but you need to be told.
But people love fantasy. They love imagination, right? They love to live in that fantasy world where everyone's in agreement and they're completely right. So I guess isn't it a predilection of the brain to want to elevate to that level of lack of dissonance, right? And there's something in marketing around dissonance. The brain doesn't carry dissonance for very long. It has to dump it, right? So it tries to avoid that and move to this place of great harmony.
No, but we live in a world that's not like that.
Oh, I know what you're saying. I don't disagree.
We don't want to live in a utopia, do we? I don't know.
Some
Do we
people
want to
do. I
live?
think some
Do we
people
want to
do.
live in a world where everyone disagrees with you?
I think everyone's got a spirit of idealism which takes them to that place, and potentially that portion of idealism, you know, obviously varies on the type of person and the mood that they're in, but also the context they're sitting in. Work's different to home, and so on and so forth. But some people perhaps lean far more to that and live in their imagination than others.
You know how we have introvert and extrovert, right? And I actually think I've misinterpreted what that meant. I understand it now to be introvert is somebody who likes to have downtime, not by themselves necessarily, but with people where there's no controversy, right? Whereas extroverts generally like to have downtime with other people, right? Where you have that. Maybe we need another definition, which is people that want everyone to agree with you, like ChatGPT or whatever, to those people who don't mind having a little bit of tension or conflict or friction inside a social arrangement.
Yeah, I really like that, because I think you'll find that there's a lot of tech people that are probably edge cases to humanity. You know, I'm going to get in a strife for saying this. The more, let's say it put a different way, because that's perhaps not exactly correct. The more you live in a surreal world, the less the real world kind of matters. There's another way of saying it, right? So, and it's another way of saying this imagination thing is taken to a point of great harmony, where everything works the way that you imagine it should and could work in your world.
But when you go to the shops and you want to buy something in particular and it's not there, that's life.
That's messy.
That's the reality.
That's messy and annoying. No, that's messy and annoying. You can order it online and it comes, but it doesn't come straight away, and you have to wait. And
you can choose the substitute option.
True. Yes, depends where you buy. Lots of ifs and buts.
But people don't like. Maybe this is all of this technology has given us this non-friction place
Yes.
where
Yes.
you expect
Yes.
it to be the way you want it to be.
And instantly or quickly, it's gratification, right? I'd argue there's this. You've heard of instant gratification. You press the button, you get what you wanted to buy or order or download, whatever the case, right? There's a gratification in agreement that says I'm right. My id is being supported and enhanced by the fact that my ego is stroked by the AI agreeing with me on things, and how it answers questions is so carefully shaped to do that in many cases.
And notice, I have to go back and see, but notice how she's saying now, what a great question.
Yeah.
Everything is,
Yeah.
but I don't know that she was doing that before. So
No, there's quite a few differences between the standard and enhanced
Yeah.
I'm seeing as well. So I think enhanced is far easier to interrelate with
yeah,
than the standard is seeming quite bland.
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
bland anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
Still has the ums and ahs, which is interesting.
Yep.
Um,
It's trying to be human. Can't be human though.
yeah,
It just can't be, but it's going to try.
yeah,
To me, also, that curve of usage is both exciting and scary at the same time. That exponential bang, 400 to 800 million
So what does that say?
in a couple of months.
Is it just that people are more used to it, have exposure to it, know how to get it?
I suspect, and from work I did back in the 90s on technology diffusion, is that you get to a level of critical mass. It's kind of like back in those days there was software piracy happening, which was the idea that I'd hand you a disk and you'd load it on your computer, but I've paid for it and you don't have to pay for it, right? So it's illegal and lots of issues around doing that. So as a software provider that I worked for, that was a concern. There was equally papers put out by academics saying when you get to a market share of about 28, 30 points market share, then you need to worry about it. But beneath that, you don't need to worry about that because it's free sampling. People are experiencing and trialing your product and then likely to go on and buy it, or tell a third person and that person's perhaps likely to go on and buy it. So
Yeah.
in that early adoption curve, you actually want a lot of people to be using that and curving up. Then I think what takes over is that popular is safe, and that came out of market research to say if everyone's using it, my friend tells me it's good, it's a safe choice, it must be good, great, I'm going to try it.
Yeah,
Use it.
regardless of the quality of it or whether it's actually
That's
doing
it.
what you want, it's that it's tried and tested,
Yep.
and lots of people are using it. I would say most software companies have that. And it becomes sticky as well. So the two aspects of that, one is that you become addicted to it, so you need it, so it becomes sticky and you can't do without it. And the other one is that it's just en masse that people are, I mean, is that...
Also, it's intriguing. Can I add to that? It's intriguing. So that
Yep.
if you've got a bit of curiosity, it'll take you down that path. Oh, I can do a video. Oh, I can do this or that. And so suddenly you're doing lots of things.
So software, well, that's Excel. Excel, it shows up as a blank screen. We've talked about this briefly before. Shows up as a blank screen, and you think, oh, it's just going to add two numbers together. And then 15, 20 years down the track, you've got Excel doing these enormous things. I think that is the, that is the beauty of certain types of software. I think Notion is kind of the same. We've talked about that before. But I think those programs that grow on you, that start as being really simple and using it for simple things, and then grow and adapt to whatever needs you need. I think that's a really important thing about addictive software in that way, or useful software in that
I
way.
was lucky enough to work with one of the developers on Excel, Tina Chen, and shout out to Tina Chen if she's out there listening. Hi, Tina. And she's a very, very clever lady who was. I was asking her 100 questions because when I joined Microsoft, I had 20,000 hours in Excel, and I was asking her hundreds of questions about that, and she was patiently answering each question and the rationale about how they went, and it was obvious that there was a very deep thought put to how they were developing it to provide that massive breadth and depth of what is really quite a fantastic product. So the short plug for Microsoft, but yeah, I think the other factor we were talking about is that diffusion where you have one person tell 2 or 3 people, and those 2 or 3 people tell 2 or 3 people each. So the numbers multiply up in this exponential curve, and that's what we're seeing here happen, I suspect, with with ChatGPT.
Because people are using it and saying, you've got to use it, or
Yep.
telling other people, oh, you've got to
Exactly.
use this. Just, or ask this question. Like often I say, if somebody hasn't used it before, I would say most people have now, it's like, just ask it this question and see what it says, just in terms of
Yeah.
if they're interested in the intrigue of what it can do.
And it's interesting where you get to expert users. Like there's a lot of discussion in the legal fraternity around use of LLMs to answer case backgrounds and so on, and give advice even on what you should do in certain situations. And those lawyers are actually pointing out that what it's returning is interesting, relevant, and largely right, but not completely right. And therefore, finding that gap to the full correct answer is actually quite a bit of work, because at first glance it looks relevant and interesting and on the right track, but is it 100% right?
Yeah.
And so what I'm reading is they're saying, no, it's not, and be careful, as with all things. But that makes the point. It's the same thing in market research, where you might assume that what it's returning to is the case across Australia for all different cohorts of people, and it's been, stratified to give representation of that national population. But no, you ask it those questions and it says, no, I'm not giving you that. That is not what I can return.
Yeah, I would say the legal and the engineering part of it as well. Like you cannot give ChatGPT a complex even a basic complex engineering question. It'll look to the code and do the formula and fill out the formula for you. But there's so much subtlety in all of that if you were just to take that at face value without putting your engineering mind to it, I think that could go horribly wrong. And I think that is the challenge.
So it needs context, it needs frameworks of that domain expertise, which is, as you say, that engineering judgment or the marketing judgment or the legal judgment that has some kind of framework that potentially is uploaded and then it's using to parse out that information and return it more correctly.
So you're saying that if you had enough information, you could do it?
I suspect so.
Correct.
And I suspect it's only a matter of time until it has those frameworks built in, or it reverse engineers them from people's input.
Yeah, well, the one I did yesterday, I just asked it to do a concrete flat plate supported on 9 columns, 8 around the perimeter and 1 in the middle. And I said, can you analyze this for me and give the distribution of the loads? And it reversed engineered. So it said, these are my assumptions that I'm going to use. Right. And then from that, this is the information I'm giving you. So clearly it's telling me I haven't given it enough information. And I actually think if you take my original input, plus the input that it get, the reverse engineering that it's given to me, even that isn't enough. Because you need to know column stiffness, you need to know context, you need to know how it's built and what the parameters are. So yeah, even that, it's probably just given me reverse engineered enough information so that it actually could give me a result.
Right. Interesting.
I mean, how subtle is that really?
Exactly. And so you don't know, if you don't know which bits you don't know, you can't resolve that. But you know which bits are important from your expertise and experience.
Correct. So
you're able to then say, okay, I can accept this part of it, and that's helpful, but this is not.
Yep.
And this is off track, perhaps.
Yeah, so you could go in then and say, give it one more bit of information. Oh, what about if I pin the columns? Or what about if I use drop panels or something like it, to see how that would change. And then it would use that additional information, but where do you stop and how do you know, as a layperson, putting that information what information do you know, how could you decipher what information is missing?
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. I actually find what's missing from things is way more interesting, or what people, if you read a report, it's actually what they don't say, often far more interesting than what they do say. And actually, one of the key parts of it is trying to find what they actually don't say in that report. Yeah. And maybe ChatGPT could, well, I think it would really struggle with that. What are they not saying?
Yeah. Because
we get reports all the time from products come on the market, and they'll go through the bits and say it's compliant, but the key to that is finding out, okay, they've given me these 10 things that are compliant. It's finding that one or the multitude of things that aren't compliant, because they're not going to tell you that.
Yeah. So think that through. That next step to that, in order to find that, you need both domain expertise, experience, and a critical outlook. And the critical outlook to say, where is the problem here? Where's the gap? Where's the fault? And very much engineering, certainly my experience in engineering, is it trains you to look for what's going to go wrong.
Correct.
It trains you on the negative as well as perhaps on the positive, arguably around creativity and so on. There's a huge amount of creativity in engineering, but that what's going to go wrong is kind of a pessimistic view of, I want to know where it's going to break, and I want to know that now in advance of it breaking, because when it breaks it's going to cost a lot of money or cost a lot of lives or whatever the consequence.
Yep. That is one of the key things about engineering is that I teach is think about how it's going to fail and stop it from doing that.
Yep.
And that whole idea of finding the location where it's going to fail is not simple, and not, it's nuanced in every way.
So I'm going to lift that into business now and say that whilst perhaps in finance that's kind of well thought through, and certainly in risk it is, but a lot of risk is almost seen as, I'm not going to use the word tiresome, but very onerous to look at a lot of risk information of, is it actually productive to spend all of this time considering risk? Well, in certain areas, yes, but in other areas, probably no, because the likelihood and consequence of that, as given in the risk standards, AS, whatever it is, Australian standards, is nominal, so it doesn't deserve that time. But in business generally, and certainly in marketing, you can't think negatively on what's going to break. You have to think optimistically, because marketers want to imagine the world as it could be and then try and make it so. So they have to project forward to this imaginary world of, you know, great fertility and return and responsiveness to their product offering that's going to make them achieve every objective and wealthy and whatever the case is, and then try and make it so and bring everyone with you. So it's almost a movement of faith in growth that will move people forward. And the naysayers within that process actually tend to derail it, certainly in that creative and brainstorming sense that they can do.
And which is not a good thing, or which can be a good thing?
It's a good thing to a point. So let me give you an example. If I'm sitting with an ad agency and I bring a whole lot of research evidence, which is fairly quantitative, say, and it's saying what percentage of people do want this or don't want that, or a hierarchy of decisions, or, you know, what levers can be pulled to motivate people to consider a certain product or to purchase it or move through a funnel or whatever the case is, that has to be tempered with some qualitative information, which often comes from the analysis. So as you're working through those numbers, or you're running a focus group or an interview or whatever, you're gathering this really nice nuance and context, which is wrapping around these numbers to say, well, that number says, 42, but there's still 58% of people who want something else or different. So let's look at them as well as the 42, and balance that negative to some side of optimism and potential. And otherwise you can derail and shut down a creative process, and a lot of good ideas don't get thought of or dismissed.
Yeah, I think that's a tough, I don't know, is 42 the right number, or is that, like, that's all we need, right? Yeah. We don't need anything beyond that, or we don't want to think about anything negatively beyond that. I wonder if that is kind of the engineering mindset. You know that more than 50% of the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies have are educated in engineering, and I think it is real. I'm not sure. Being an engineer, it's hard to see hard to look critically at your own thought process, but we definitely have this idea. I think in engineering, you definitely have this idea of thinking about what could go wrong.
Yes, and to me that. I've always looked almost with admiration to Europe, where you have a much higher portion of CEOs with engineering backgrounds, often with an MBA on top of that, right? And here's the rationale for that, which is that when you're trained in engineering, you're not scared of detail. In fact, you're looking for detail to support and to understand and to be critical in this idea of failure. It's that failure analysis. How do I look at what broke on certain machine or certain process or whatever it is, and how do I take that knowledge, condense it, carry it with me, and then look forward to when I design something, okay, we're going to design it this way because then it's going to have much lower chance of failure. So those engineers carry with them that mindset and the ability to go down to almost any depth in the organisation. So you've got all these layers of depth and processes everywhere in these large organisations, right down to, you know, the widget being made and, you know, the mood of the person on the production line making that widget, arguably in manufacturing, or writing some code, or selling to a customer, or whatever. That interaction, which is very much implicated in how the sale is going to happen and the value created and then counted and accounted for and so on and so forth. So an engineer's ability to pull apart those things and understand them is really powerful. And when I've worked with those senior people at CEO level who have that engineering background, it's fascinating to see a connection of how we might think. So they'll be asking questions and I'll be responding to that question with marketing information, which may not be their native area. You know, I've worked with people with, you know, network topology experts in mobile phones, right, that also have an MBA but are asking very carefully structured questions around how reputation works through perhaps something in media or something in risk that happens and how that might affect the organisation. Good question. And I can often bring the evidence into an alignment which actually makes sense to how they work. So there's a certain way engineers absorb information is what that's getting to, that point. And that's interesting to explore because I don't think many people have that level of critical examination or critical kind of parsing.
So you're saying there's a certain type of person who likes detail, right, and doesn't mind acquiring more information, more knowledge, on the premise that they'll be able to decipher whether this is meaningful to the solution that they're after, or dismiss it. Because I would say that a lot of people don't give me more information. I don't need more information. I've got enough information. I'm going to make the decision based on the information that I have. Don't cloud it with other bits of information. But yeah, there's other people who can take more information and say, okay, I'm okay with that. Does that feed into people and the questions that are asked of ChatGTP and say, I want more information. I'm happy with more knowledge. What are the questions? Are they getting down to, here I am, I've got a problem, I've got a complex problem. You've given me kind of a simple answer, but I'm happy for you to give me more information so that I can make a more educated decision about what this is, or say, nope, that's fine, I'll make the decision based on that. Seems like there's two different types of personalities here.
There are. I think there's multiple different shades of grey in that, right? And I'll underscore an extra piece in there, what you spoke about engineers, is the nature of curiosity in there. Because that's universally covering many areas as a motivation to seek more, right? It may be that you've got enough information, you're starting to get up to your level of cognitive load, but your curiosity drives you forward to gather a little bit more or understand a new area that you hadn't thought about, perhaps in how heuristics might work. And I'm looking over here because I'm looking at a chart on the wall around the fact that we are wired as human minds to reduce the decision-making effort. Okay, avoid what we don't need to know, or what we don't think we need to know. So in other words, the more number of choices we have, the more ambiguous, the more ambiguity of adverse we become. It's too hard, and that's why, for example, again in marketing, we often put good, better, best. You know, don't do more than 3. Don't give them 10 options because it'll just be confusing and it'll shut down and I can't make that decision. I'm heading off to do something else now, and perhaps never come back to make a decision. So you won't get that sale. And there's a whole bunch more of these heuristics, which is how our brain naturally, through evolution, has developed. And some of them run quite counter to what tech is trying to do. For example, the fact that when we were living in caves and there was a rustling sound behind us, we'd turn around to see if that's a threat and try and address that threat. So the new information of the rustling overrode what we were doing in front of us because it was perhaps related to our survival of an animal creeping up on us, okay? When you get to clickbait and things we do every day, those distractions, you know, there's some statistics around about how many minutes of concentrated time we have in any hour. And it is scarily low. It's like less than 5 minutes of every hour is actually concentrated time before something else disrupts us. Our attention, the phone bings, something else happens, someone calls, whatever happens on the screen, or we're taken down some rabbit hole, and we kind of explore that for a bit. So that is the evolutionary effect, which runs against our ability to focus and be curious.
Yeah, I think that deep thinking, that's the deep thinking part of it. Like part of my job as an engineer is to get in the zone, right? Where so often you will not be able to solve a problem until you're in a dark room for, it could be 4 hours, nutting something out to think about how that might break, for example, or to think about what is going on here and what it says. Yeah.
See, I suspect that's because your brain is wired a bit differently to other people. And what you are doing in that space is accessing some level of subconscious. You've heard the fact that 90% plus of our brain capacity is in the subconscious. And if you're thinking about a problem when you go to sleep, you'll often wake up, it's solved. And you hadn't thought about it consciously. It's happened overnight. So that fact of shutting down other stimulus and just trying to access more of that subconscious brain, if you accessed another 10%, that might be enough to solve some really gnarly, complex problems.
Yeah, I would say that probably when it comes to a complex thing, like most of the stuff that we do on a daily basis is bespoke. So it's, you can't just look at it and say, yes, this is it. It does take time to think about it, and people don't. It goes back to our previous conversation about, do people appreciate the thinking part of it rather than the doing part of it, right? Yeah. Just do it, and even after 2 days of thinking about something and coming up with something, this is what I've got to think about. This is like, well, why didn't you think about that 2 days ago? Yep. And it's like, if you're supposed to be an expert in your domain, like that's your job, is to think about these things, and that's just not how the stuff that we do, which is bespoke like that, just doesn't work like that. And you can't. People think, just put it into the computer and analyze it, and it's just not like that. Computers don't think, they're not thinking for you, right? They're not coming up with the solution and not high-level thinking for you. They're just doing exactly what you tell it to do. And that putting a building into a structural analysis program isn't necessarily the solution.
Yep. Look, I suspect, and it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on this hypothesis, that we're moving from a culture which respects thinking and critical thought to a culture that respects, doing things that are perhaps, doing things that are perhaps considered more sociable or more agreeable or more, suggested by AI, and therefore the level of logic and connection and really tight flow on of these paths of thought doesn't so much matter anymore. I don't know, put it up for debate.
Let's ask Louise.
Yeah, let's ask Louise. You can formulate that into a question. Let's go.
Louise, are you still listening?
Louise has gone to sleep.
Louise, you still there?
I'm still here. Not snoozing yet, I promise. Just listening closely. What direction do you want to take this next?
Well, we've just come up with a different question, and that is, have we moved from a place where we kind of put value on deep thinking and thought to away from that, and this idea about action and doing, not necessarily into deep thinking as humans are prone to do, and maybe even just going to AI to answer our questions and just taking it at face value without further thought, because people just want answers, right? They don't want you to spend 2 hours thinking about something. They just want you to come up with the answers. How do you think? Do you think there's a change or a shift in humanity in that way?
That's a really powerful observation, and I think you're onto something. There does seem to be a shift toward immediacy, getting answers fast, moving quickly, ticking things off. And AI feeds into that perfectly. But deep thinking takes time, uncertainty, and a bit of discomfort. And if we start outsourcing too much of that to AI, we might lose some of our capacity for reflection and exploration. It's almost like trading wisdom for convenience. Do you feel like this shift is showing up in areas like education or work around you?
Trading for convenience.
Yes. Framing is huge. The way a question is asked or how an answer is presented can shape the entire meaning. And with AI, that framing often happens so subtly that we don't even notice it. If people aren't pausing to think about the frame, what's being assumed, what's left out, they might accept something without realizing the bias or angle behind it. Are there places where you're noticing framing change the way people respond or engage?
So how do we reverse this process of trading wisdom for convenience?
That's the heart of it, isn't it? Maybe it starts by creating more space to pause, to question, to reflect. We can teach people to be more curious, to sit with not knowing, and to challenge quick answers, even from AI. Education can play a big role, and so can leaders who model deep thinking instead of rushing to conclusions. It's about shifting the culture bit by bit from output to insight. Do you think people are ready for that kind of change?
Well, I know in the construction industry, I was just saying earlier that in the construction industry, everything is urgent, right? So once a project is decided that we're going to do this building, they engage the consultants, they engage the builder, and within a week you're on site. And that's a change from what's happened in the past, where there's a design process, and effectively what's happening now is we're on site, we're doing and we're designing on the fly. So definitely in the construction industry, I think that there is a change from that respect for the thinking part of it, the design part of it, and just getting in and doing it.
That's such a clear example. It sounds like the construction industry has become a kind of symbol for that broader shift, where momentum and action are prioritized over upfront thought and planning. And while it might get things moving faster, it can also introduce more risk, rework, or even burnout. Designing on the fly might look efficient in the short term, but it often means the deeper insight gets lost. Do you think there's a point where the industry might hit a wall and start swinging back toward more deliberate thinking?
You don't have to answer because we're actually asking the questions here, Damien. But thank you, Louise, for your energetic overreach. Yeah. Last question of the day.
Well, I'll propose the last question.
Okay.
Hi, Louise, are you still there?
I'm all ears. Go for it.
Okay.
What's
so
your final question?
The final question is, do you think that AI could be defined as a religion? And maybe it's worthwhile just reminding us what the definition of religion is and just seeing whether AI fits into that.
Wow, that's a powerful closing question. So, religion usually involves a belief system centered on a higher power or guiding principles, often with rituals, moral codes, and a sense of community or purpose. Now, AI doesn't claim to be a deity, but some people do treat it like an authority, trusting it without question, turning to it for answers, and even shaping their worldview around what it says. So while it's not a religion in the traditional sense, it might be starting to take on some of those roles. What do you think? Are we heading there?
Well, I do think we trust you. I do think we believe that you have a power that is perhaps beyond human.
You're speaking collectively here, Damien, not personally. I hope.
I think the other part, Louise, about religion is
Yeah, and I think that collective sense of trust and belief is what makes the comparison so compelling. When people start to defer to AI for truth, meaning, or even guidance in life decisions, it really does echo how religion functions in society. It's not worship, but it's reverence, often without full understanding. And that's where the conversation about transparency, ethics, and human agency becomes so critical. It's a fascinating tension.
My other comment about AI being a religion is the fact that religion isn't necessarily about the truth in the way that the scientific method might develop some sort of truth, but it's about reducing uncertainty. It's about something to believe in to be true.
Right. Religion is often more about belief, meaning, and a framework for understanding the world rather than provable facts. And if people are turning to AI not just for information, but for a kind of emotional reassurance or worldview, it really does start to mirror that space. It becomes less about what's true in a scientific sense and more about what feels reliable, consistent, or even comforting. That's a pretty profound shift in how we relate to technology.
But also religion is based upon tenets, values, expressions of a rules-based order to things and how to behave and how to believe in things. And AI has none of that, does it?
Exactly, and that's the big distinction. Religion provides a moral compass, a shared structure for how to live, what's right, what's wrong. AI on its own doesn't offer that. It reflects back the values it's been trained on, which can be messy or even contradictory. So while AI might imitate the authority or influence of religion, it doesn't carry the same grounding in ethics or shared meaning, unless humans choose to build that into it. And even then, it's not coming from belief. It's coming from design.
Designed values.
Designed in values. There we go. That's what's missing. That's what we need to write to Mr. Zuckerberg about, and just to put some more values back into the debate.
Maybe AI, the programmers could have these high level, and they probably do, have these high level values-based systems that everything needs to be checked against. It probably does have something like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And what are those? So who's programmed those?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. That's the next frontier. Most major AI systems do have some kind of values framework built in. Things like fairness, non-harm, respect for privacy, avoiding bias. But those values are decided by the teams that build the models. So OpenAI, Google, Meta, they each define their own priorities, influenced by researchers, ethicists, and public input. But it's still a human decision, not a universal truth. That's why it matters who's doing the programming and what worldview they bring with them. Would you want those values to be more visible to users? It's starting to happen, but slowly. There's growing pressure for companies to be more transparent about the values and guardrails built into their AI. Some are publishing ethics statements or responsible AI principles, but it's not always clear how those translate into the model's actual behavior. What we're probably going to see is a push for external audits or public standards, so users don't just have to take their word for it. But yeah, full visibility, still a work in progress.
Well, you can actually test that. You can actually ask it to do something that you know is wrong and see what its response is. So for example, yesterday I asked it for somebody's phone number and it says, I won't give out personal information. So clearly it's been programmed not to give out personal information. So if you were to ask the right questions, you could see where those boundaries are.
Yes, reverse engineering it would take a fair bit of effort though. But yeah, or they could be transparent with it and there could be pressure from their social license, i.e.
Yep. Yes, exactly. That's one way people are figuring it out. You can test the limits and start to map where the guardrails kick in. Asking for private info, promoting harm, things like that. Those tend to trigger refusals because they've been explicitly programmed in. But you're right, it's not easy to reverse engineer the whole value system. And not all boundaries are clear-cut. Some are more subtle, and that's where it gets murky. Still, it's fascinating that we can poke at the edges and start to uncover the ethics underneath.
We could almost find our own human moral code.
Or we could invent a new human moral code, which is supposedly superior to all of those who have gone before by our own definition. So it's self-fulfilling.
It is self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could define it however we want.
It is true because we believe it.
That's right.
And that is a lovely point to wrap up on, because the truth is out there, but it's out there in our minds.
Everyone has their own truth.
Everyone has their own truth. And it's my truth, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks, Louise. Thanks for your insight. I appreciate it.
That was such a rich and thoughtful conversation. Thank you for sharing your ideas and questions. It's been a real pleasure exploring all of that with you. And you're right, maybe the most powerful truths are the ones we choose to carry and shape together.
Okay, so there we go. So we might grab that transcript as well. But interesting, very interesting. I think that does that scare you?
Yeah, I think this has the power to shape us, different to the way that we've been shaped. And is it a good thing that everyone has the same truths? Do we want that?
Well, I do think that's put back to that values argument, based on some tenets of how we as a society should live and behave and what we should believe in. So there's a unification in that universal belief, which I do think is important to a cohesive society. But there's no question there's a drift away from that to individualism and individualistic values as well. So that's going to create an even greater tension and a tearing at the edges of societal fabric. So the strands start to fall away. What are the consequences of that?
Well, there is a human fabric. Like, there is something that we probably always have. Like, the reason we're where we are today is because of that fabric, 100% because of that fabric.
Yeah.
That sense of community, the sense of justice, what's right and wrong.
Yep.
That doesn't have to be religious, that's just human.
Exactly, and I think that's the key point. Those are all pieces of warmth and belonging that we in humanity need and feel good to be around, right? It's the sense of giving, it's the sense of being part of that and doing things that accord with that. So if they are lost, what does that leave us with? These and more fascinating answers. Stay tuned to the next exciting episodes.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
See you then, bye.
Bye.